Hi everyone out there and welcome to this another late night Scream review, and this time we're talking about Imaginary.
Every culture has a name for it. We call them imaginary friends.
So Imaginary is a film directed by Jeff Wadlow and is in all major cineplexes in the UK as of I think yesterday. So yeah, go out, it's there.
What's the story? Morning glory.
So this film tells a story of a woman called Jessica who has a lot of bad dreams. As an adult, she has night terrors, but then she's also a children's book illustrator in her professional career. She's grown up now, and she moves back to her old family home where many years earlier, as a child, she experienced some very awful things relating to her and her imaginary friend. But she's unfortunately forgotten about all this and moves in with her new family. She's a stepmom with two daughters, one being a sort of angry, angst-ridden teenager and one being a very lovely little girl. Where have we seen this before? One night, the little girl wanders down into the basement and opens a tiny little door in the wall. And inside that crawl space, there happens to be a tiny little teddy bear. Brilliant. And this kind of kicks off the little girl's kind of repeating of her stepmom's kind of experiences where she has an imaginary friend and bad things follow. I hate teddy bears. So what did I think of the movie? So yeah, I went to my local cineplex in Loughborough, the Cineworld in Loughborough, and went to watch this movie. It was in a really small screen. There was only about 5 or 6 people in there, which, obviously is bad for the cineplex, but for me it was brilliant, perfect. No screaming kids, no teenagers on their phones. It was a good experience. I didn't really know what to expect from this movie. Obviously it's a kind of Blumhouse, so yes, it is kind of riddled with Blumhousian type cliches, I guess, at this point. So yeah, things it's to be honest, it's fairly lazily written. There are plot holes abound. There are characterizations that we've seen a million times before in any kind of modern horror movie in the last 10 years. So there's loads of Blumhouse tropes. Having said that, though, I did kind of enjoy this movie. Now, what are the positives about this film? Why did I enjoy it? Because for me, it is actually quite unusual for me to come away from a Blumhouse film and go, actually, yeah, that was okay. And again, I'm going to stress this right up front. I'm not saying that this film was an absolute masterwork of horror. I'm not saying it was this incredible movie and everybody should go out there and experience it. But what I am going to say is, for a modern Blumhouse movie, with all the tropes, with all the things we've seen a million times before, especially with Blumhouse, this film was a little bit different. It had a little bit of something extra, and to me, I guess that just went a long way. Maybe I'm a sucker for punishment, I don't know, but it went a long way. What did this film have? Well, the actors were good. They were fine. The little girl was a bit questionable in certain places, but I excuse that sometimes with quite young actors. She was a bit in some places, but the main cast were great. They were fine. Again, it was shot perfectly well, just like most of these modern horror movies are. But this film, what it did have in its favour, what was different about this movie is that towards the last third of the movie, where the climax takes place, let's just kind of be upfront about this. The imaginary friend is real. It's a demon. It's a monster from another realm, a different dimension that tries to lure the kids in to have them forever in its imaginary Disneyland play world kind of thing. You have to crawl through the door, and once you do that, you never get out. You're never coming back. So I don't think it's any real spoilers to say that in the last act of this movie, the characters end up in this fantasy imaginary world, and it's actually a real working set. The set and the kind of color design and the sound design when the characters enter this imaginary world, it's actually really imaginative. It's interesting. There's things to see. The set is obviously all weird the floor is at all weird angles, and there's lightning and clouds going through the sky and in the ceilings. The doors have various different things on them and blah, 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 blah. They open up posters that are nailed to the wall, and then you can look through into the real world and all that kind of great stuff. And for me, it just reminded me of those kind of very late 80s, early 90s horror films, or at least those kind of they're almost like family-friendly films, but with a kind of horror, edge to them. Things like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. If you've ever seen that movie, when Bill and Ted get killed, they go into like the afterlife, and it's really weird and freaky and not quite right and coloured strangely and all this kind of stuff. And this film does exactly that same thing. And again, I've not seen that in a kind of horror film in a really long time. So for me, I thought they actually put a bit of effort into this movie. It's not just dark corridors. It's not just some thing stood in the background in the corner, and it's like, oh look, there's a figurine back. There's a figure back in the. That's so clever. That trope's just done to death. Well, this film, it does that a little bit, but as I say, with the creature, with the kind of lore, with the third act being taking place inside this imaginary world, they actually really tried and built some realistic sets. They lit it in an interesting, strange way. There is an actual practical monster effect at the end of this movie. The guise of the creature has many different forms, and one of them is a normal teddy bear in the real world, but then when we go into the fantasy world, it's like this ginormous bear monster, and it's actually quite freaky, and it's cool, and it's a practical puppet costume effect. Again, when was the last time you saw that in a kind of mainstream horror release? I haven't seen it in a while. I don't know, like there was nudges. I felt like this film did the kind of nudging and winking to the audience. This film felt to me in very much the same kind of realm as the later Nightmare on Elm Street movies, where they got a bit kind of sillier and a bit kind of fun. And again, you could see that's a negative, but for me it wasn't. I actually quite enjoyed it. It entertained me. There were certain aspects of this film where I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming, or like there was a twist to the plot, and I was like, okay, maybe I knew it was coming, but they did it in a nice way. They pulled it off quite well. Again, I'm not going to rave about this movie being the best thing I've ever seen. It's a Blumhouse film. It's full of those tropes. There are plot holes. It's loosely written. It's not kind of as tight as it should be. There's not a huge amount of characterization. But for me, there was just enough things that were just slightly different, that had a bit of an effort put into them, that really kind of kept me engaged in the movie. And when the kind of twists did come, I was like, oh, okay, that's mildly clever. And you know what, for me at this point, to see these kind of Blumhouseian kind of modern horrors, I'm actually pretty pleased with that. As I say, it's well acted, an interesting creature character. Yes, the kind of idea of an imaginary character, or a teddy bear being evil or a doll being evil, is not original, but they did try and present this in a new and different way. They did something with the lighting, they did something with the sound effects, they actually built real sets and made the world a bit silly and a bit fun and a bit of a nudge and nudge wink wink. And to me, that's my favourite kind of horror. I was genuinely entertained watching this movie. I enjoyed it. I laughed at some bits. It kind of made me kind of just like sort of squeal with a bit of joy at certain aspects, as I say, with the practical makeup effects and stuff like that. And I just rode this film like a pony and enjoyed my time. So it's not a high recommend from me. It's a recommend. I enjoyed it. I think a general horror movie audience will enjoy this. If you're a Blumhouse fan, you're going to absolutely love it. If you're not a Blumhouse fan and you hate Blumhouseian kind of modern horror, you should still go see this film, because I think and I hope that you'll get something out of it. So that's my review for Imaginary. It's all right. It's a pretty good film, apart from the Blumhouseian tropes. So until next week, guys, stay safe, stay scared, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.